Hello, this is Dr. Kathy Marshak, and we're going to start the live here in a moment. I know it takes a minute for the video to catch the wave and catch people's attention, so you join me. I try to start as close to one as I possibly can, not always possible, but today I think I did it. And I'll repeat myself as soon as people join me. But I'll give you some basics, and then I'll repeat the topic again. Today the topic is I might want to go up and read what I wrote here. How does a radiant empathy angel step it up with all the increasing holiday stress in our neurodivergent relationships and families? How does a radiant empathy angel step it up? So I want to remind you that Facebook is a public platform. And this is a live public event. I am recording, so it will be available here on Facebook afterwards for you to interact with. And oh, by the way, as people come in, let me know. Put something in the comment section that you've arrived and that you can hear me and see me, and that all the technology is working. It helps me if you do that. So it's a public forum, which means that I assume the people that are joining me are interested in neurodivergent relationships. So we're going to have neurodiverse individuals as well as neurotypicals watching this live and watching the recording and making comments. Oh, good, more people have found me. Please just make a quick little note in the comment section. I'll keep looking over here to see if you're here. I hope you can hear me and see me. So one of the things that I do is, because this is an open forum, I can speak to both neurodiverse and neurotypical, or spectrum and non-spectrum folks. It says there's a reaction there. Let me see here. I got a thumbs up, so you must be able to hear and see me if I got a thumbs up. I appreciate that. So one of the nice things about this, hi Nancy, good. One of the nice things I think about the public forum is that it's an opportunity for spectrum and non-spectrum, or autistic and neurotypical, or neurodiverse and neurotypical folks to kind of hear the same information, but I try to present it depending on what it is that the questioner is asking me. Hi, Debbie. But if you do want more privacy in responding to this topic, because your comments are on Facebook too, and anybody who's a Facebook user could find them. If you want privacy, you're certainly welcome to join a couple of my private groups. So one of them is Meetup. I've got the link there, and then another link I think I put in the room in the post is. Let me look and see what I did here. Yes, it's resources for neurodivergent relationships. So that link will take you to a small video that I put together that tells you about all of the support groups, the private groups, the Meetup group, the Premier Community Forum, which is for neurotypicals only. Then there's the course, and there's a forum for people taking the course, and the people taking the course are both neurotypical and neurodiverse, but it's private. You have to be a member so that you don't have to share things with people that may not understand. Oh, good morning, Julie. It's morning for her. It's not morning here. It's still late morning, though, for you, I think. Tomorrow. It's tomorrow. She's in New Zealand, so I'm joking. Okay, so the idea is that I want you to feel free to ask questions from whatever angle, and even though I've got the topic of how does a radiant empathy angel step it up, we can veer off that subject if you have other things you want to know about. But let me talk about what a radiant empathy angel is, because I think it's a pretty special person. So, and I'm going to back up and sort of describe what I mean by neurodivergent, and what I mean by neurodiverse, and what I mean by neurotypical, because those terms are kind of confusing to people. Neurodiverse people, in my world, I'm going to be talking about are on the autism spectrum. Neurodiverse in a general sense is a political term, and it refers to anybody who isn't wired according to kind of the norm group. So that might include people with ADHD or someone with bipolar disorder, or even an alcoholic for that matter. But that's just too broad. So for me, neurodiverse means high functioning autism. Okay, that's what I'm saying when I say neurodiverse. For neurotypical, it's people that are not on the spectrum. And today we're going to be talking about neurotypicals who have radiant empathy. They're radiant empathy angels. And I'll explain what that means in just a minute. Neurodivergence, if you're in a neurodivergent relationship, the way I define that is that you're a neurodiverse person and a neurotypical person in a relationship together, which tends to diverge frequently when you're communicating. It feels like you're either colliding or diverging, as opposed to working together toward common good. So the purpose of this Facebook Live is about, over and over again, my talks are about how do we work things out so that we work together, so that we make it possible to to resolve problems instead of to collide and diverge. This is a Facebook Live for relationship development, although you can also grow as an individual too. So what is a radiant empathy angel? One of the things that goes on for people who are empathic, and that would be our neurotypical group, empathy is the ability, so some more definitions here, empathy is the ability to, in the moment, get the other person, speak to the other person, step into their reality, and invite them in to your own reality, and that goes back and forth between two empathic people. If you're dealing with a transactional person, somebody on the autism spectrum, for example, they struggle more with stepping into your reality. They can sort of get it intellectually. They can also get it if they reduce their anxiety. All right, they can kind of get you, but it's not the same as the comfortable flow between empathic people. And there's a reason for that delay in their processing, and it doesn't mean that they can't be kind and compassionate and supportive and all of that. It's just the communication can really get out of whack. By the way, it's okay to leave me questions as I'm talking. I keep looking over there to see if there's anything I need to respond to. So a radiant empathy angel is somebody who's kind of been through the wars. This is a person who is empathic and recognizes that they're not going to get an empathic response from their neurodiverse loved one, at least not an empathic in the moment response, and that they're able to step it up to a higher level of being. It's a higher moral level. So what I find is that our empathy expands and we become radiant empathy angels when we're forced to recognize that you're really a wonderful human being and you don't need to crumble because you're having struggles with this other person. And on the other side of it, that's why I wrote, be supportive of your radiant empathy angels too. You may not be a radiant empathy angel, but you can still be kind and supportive and slow yourself down from reacting in a hostile or even a tearful way to be there for the other person. I don't know if that makes sense, but we'll get to that. So I also talked in this Facebook Live about microaggressions. I put that in there because one of the problems that happens is when you don't have radiant empathy, or if you feel hurt or you're offended, we can stoop to a low level and use approaches to solve the problems that aren't very highly ethical. That's what microaggressions are. And I'll get back to talking about that in a minute. But before we go much further with this subject, I want to tell you what's on deck for this coming month, because These are events that you might want to sign up for, and you do need to be part of one of our private membership groups to attend these events. There's a teleconference, which is a large group event, and then I have video conferences, which are small group. They're all audio recorded and saved at either the Premium Community Forum or my course, Asperger Syndrome and Relationships Forum. They're saved there so that you can go back and listen to many, many years worth of recordings, which are very, very helpful. This recording just goes on YouTube, and I have a lot of YouTubes that are free, and you can go and listen to those or watch those and listen to those too. But one nice thing about going into the forums is you get to talk to other people who are living this life, and then you don't feel so alone. I think that was the reason I set it up, so you wouldn't be by yourself or just talking to Dr. Marshak. It's helpful to have a therapist for sure, but it's also helpful to talk to other people who are, living the same life and have the same problems, and you say, I can't believe I thought I was the only one who had this collision of worlds. Okay, so these events that are coming up, let me walk you through them so that you know what we're talking about for December. And it's a shorter month because I take the last 10 days off like most people do, and we're not going to be meeting then. But the first one is this is a video conference that will be held on the Advanced Community Forum, and it's also a meetup group. The Advanced Community Forum, you can go to as many events as you want to, and you don't have to pay anything extra. In the meetup group, you pay for each event you attend, except for the teleconference. And the reason for that is that some people aren't sure if they're ready to be part of a group, and Meetup is a great way to get started. You join, you get to sort of find out that you aren't alone, and then pretty soon you want to take a deeper dive and you join the Premium Forum. So the first one is, how do I keep my sanity around my super sensitive Aspies? And that's Wednesday, December 4th. Now this event is for neurotypicals only. So that's why we're talking about super sensitive Aspies. How do I keep my sanity around my super sensitive Aspies? So again, if you're developing radiant empathy, you're going to learn how to recognize that sensitivity is because the neurodiverse struggle with quickly adjusting to the things you're doing. They don't move at the same pace you do in understanding the emotional impact of what you're saying. So we'll be talking about how do I keep my sanity when the stress of the holidays is making my already stressed neurodiverse loved ones even more stressed. The next conference is, do you feel minimized? Let's talk about microaggressions, and I mentioned that a minute ago. What that's about is how do you manage when people are distressed and so they sort of hit you below the belt. That's what a microaggression is. It's a rolling their eyes, and both neurotypicals and neurodiverse can do microaggressions, by the way. That's not limited to people on the spectrum. But when people are anxious, when they're, not as confident of their communication skills, and many people on the spectrum are not as confident, they can drop down and use some unkind comments, and we want to find a way to cope with that. So this, again, the second conference is for neurotypicals in the meetup group and the Premium Forum. And the first group, how do I keep my sanity around my supersensitive Aspies, is December 4th. All of this is marked on the calendar at Meetup or the Advanced Community Forum. So you can always click in there and find it. The second one, do you feel minimized, will be December 11th. Again, it's on you can find it on the calendar. And then the next thing to come up on December 12th is our free member video call with Julie, going over the edge in your neurodivergent relationships. And Julie's on our call today. At least she was. I hope she's still here. Julie is our ambassador. And what she does is, Jennifer, you made it. Good. I'm glad you're here. What Julie does is she's been around for a decade in our group. And so she's really knowledgeable about all the resources. You can click on that link that I posted, resources for neurodivergent relationships. But you can also go to Julie's free video call if you're a member of the Meetup and the Advanced Community Forum. You can go to the call, ask her questions. She talks about her life as the wife and mother of Spectrum folks, and having found the group and what she's learned, and she's just a wealth of information and support. You just feel emotionally supported. So sometimes we feel kind of overwhelmed. I forget that I've been doing this for 25 years, so I forget that I have all these resources, and I bounce around and I go from group to group, and I write a book and I write a blog, and I've got a podcast, and and I'm recording video reels and all that stuff, and I forget that you might be a little nervous about jumping right in and going out for all of this information. So Julie's video call is really helpful for newbies or anybody who wants to kind of get back in. Sometimes we have people who leave the group and come back in a year later, 2 years later, 5 years later, as another layer of awareness comes over you. So that's Julie's group, and it's free to all members of our meetup group and our advanced forum. And then the next event to happen is for those taking the course, the online video course, recorded course, Asperger's Syndrome and Relationships. And if you take the course, then you have a forum to talk to with other users of the course. And we meet, well, you can go into the forum and chat, but we also have a monthly webinar, and where you can talk to other members, and I record that as well. And that is entitled to Become a Love Magnet for the Holidays. I wanted to make it make it a kind of a positive thing. How do we keep the love going during the holidays? Because, of course, this is a holiday season that is considered the national love holiday. Whether you're celebrating Christmas or another midwinter holiday, it's kind of the same. The idea is, how do we keep the love going when all this other stress is taking hold of us? So I think it's going to be an exciting webinar, because I'm going to be talking to neurodiverse and neurotypicals working together, right? Oh, Julie, you're so cute. She said you're such an inspiration. I love praise. So put your questions in the comment section too, because I'm happy to answer those. Okay, then after the webinar is, or I guess it's about the same time, December 12th, on that same day is the free teleconference, How Does a Radiant Empathy Angel Step It Up with All the Stress? So this is kind of a carryover of this talk, except the Facebook, Dr. Kathy's office hours, but this free conference call is for the neurotypicals only. So this is people in the meetup group and the premium community forum, where you get to, ask questions. I'll do a presentation similar to what I'm doing here, and then people can get in the queue and ask questions live and or bring up a topic of concern to you. And honestly, I was just noticing the other day, I went to my YouTube channel and I saw that people had been downloading a dozen of my YouTubes and saving it for them to look at later. And this is important to do. You need to really, in order to change your paradigm about these relationships, you probably need to watch lots of these recordings, listen to the teleconferences, join the group, ask questions, learn from each other. You're going to hear the same things that I'm saying, but a slightly different angle, from somebody halfway around the world. And it's just it just is hard to change your paradigm unless you keep rehearsing. Okay, and then next month, I'm just giving you the agenda, then we'll go back to this discussion. Next month's Dr. Kathy's office hours on Facebook the title is I'm So Overwhelmed, Planning the Year Ahead as a Neurotypical Partner, but we're also going to put Neurodiverse Partner down there too. So the Facebook Live Dr. Kathy's office hours is, how do we plan the year ahead for these neurodivergent relationships? How do you take care of yourself? How do you be there for others? So not easy to do. And then the last thing is that if you want to leave me a question to talk about during Dr. Kathy's office hours, then you can go to, I think you have to go to my website to leave it, but you can also leave it here, and I'll just post it. But you can go to Dr. Kathy's office hours on my website, and that's kmarshak.com. You can go there and leave me a question, and somebody did that. Let's see here, which I think is really a good question. She was referring to one of my blogs, and I'll get to that question in just a minute. And oh, by the way, you can leave questions anonymously if you go to Dr. Kathy's office hours and leave me a question. You just post it there on my website, and I won't give your name out if you don't want me to. Oh, Louise. Hi, Louise. So Louise left me a message. I want to make sure I got to the basics here. And I want to get back to really helping you understand what a radiant empathy angel is. She's not perfect. He's not perfect. This is somebody, though, who relies on their empathy to navigate relationships. Okay? And as a result of that, you keep going back inside yourself and saying, what is there for me to learn from this other person who's trying to talk to me? Even if this other person is unhappy with me. Radiant empathy angels keep rising above. I talked about my dream that I had about the tidal wave. You fly up out of the tidal wave and onto higher ground rather than just getting yourself bashed against the rocks by the tidal wave over and over again. So let's see here. Let's go to what Louise is asking. I talked to my therapist this morning and told her the latest in my life and lack of support. She told me to ask him how invested he was, so I did. He said about 75%. What do you make of this answer? Oh my gosh, Louise, this is cute. So her spouse is on the spectrum. How invested is he in this relationship? If you think about it, investments are dollars and cents. They're numbers. And so he came up with a number, about 75%. What she meant was, I'm giving 100%. Are you giving 100%? We have to, the empathic angel is willing to give 150%, frankly. He or she is willing to just take full responsibility for, let's work this out. The problem is if the other person isn't taking full responsibility and doesn't use empathy, they come up with an answer like, I'm 75% invested. And he doesn't really mean that. He doesn't know what you're asking. So a lot of times with my neurodiverse clients, I'll say, do you believe that in order for the relationship to work, you need to work as hard as your partner? And they'll say yes. They think that makes perfect sense. And then I'll say, well, how much do you think that is? And they say, well, if I'm giving 50%, he should give 50% or she should give 50%. And I said, no. It's everybody gives 100% of themselves. That's what empathy is. Empathy is giving 100%, inviting that person into your reality and stepping into their reality. And it goes on, it's millisecond, back and forth, back and forth. So we probably asked him the wrong question. Your therapist meant well, but I wouldn't ask how invested you are. And then Julie, she says, I think repetition is the key, helping us to understand we learn from each other. Yes, both of those. Whenever we're changing a paradigm, because you've all got your notion of the way it is until you start learning some of these things that I'm teaching in my courses and my blogs and my podcasts and all that. Took me forever to figure this stuff out. When you start to change your paradigm, it really isn't so complicated, but right now, we keep getting stuck. Right? We keep trying to understand it the way we've always done it, and that's not going to work, is it? It's like science fiction. I was just thinking about this morning. I started watching it's on Netflix or Apple or one of those. Anyway, it's called Silo, and it's science fiction, and it's so interesting because science fiction is fascinating to me. I'm a Star Trek person too, but the idea is that science fiction writers often talk about how we don't see things the way they really are. You see them as you want them to be. And then the story unravels and you start to realize that there's something going on here that's otherworldly, right? So science fiction makes you wake up and realize that there might be another way to communicate both with your neurotypical and with your neurodiverse person. It goes both ways because we each have our own, as John Grinder and Richard Bandler said, our own map of reality. We're functioning from our notion of reality, not necessarily reality. So we have to be open, and we'll always function from our notion, but we can be open, right? Does this make sense? We can be open that there might be something different that I wasn't aware of, right? Might be things I never thought about before. So if you do that, even if you can't figure out what's going on with the other person, you will approach them with respect. That's what a radiant empathy angel does. He or she is able to recognize that the other person is doing the very best they know how, and there's got to be a reason for it. Now, I'm not saying that you should put up with abuse or nasty behavior or be nasty yourself. I'm not saying that. But the idea is to trust that there's something else going on here. So Nancy says, I think I'm dealing with demand avoidance in my spouse. Do you have suggestions for navigating this challenge and remaining empathic? Right. I just, actually there's a diagnosis, right? Pathological demand avoidance. And it becomes pathological when the person is so scared and so shut down, so defensive, that they say no to everything before you even finish your question. And that's what she's talking about. How do you remain empathic when you can't even finish your question and the other person's already said no or got up and walked away? And okay, so this is a great question, especially for radiant empathy angels. It's like you don't have to be a doormat and you don't have to put up with walking away, but you can say, it looks like this isn't a good time to talk about that. How about if we try again tomorrow? You may still get a resistance, but if you keep accepting that that other person can't move at your speed, right? I think radiant empathy angels are fearless. I hope that makes sense to you. What this means is that you're willing to keep putting yourself in there even though it's hard. Oh, Debbie says the same thing. Yeah, same here, I think, but would like to hear that explained. Right. So does it make sense that psychologists learned this a long time ago? When you get resistance from somebody, when somebody goes, I don't know, or I don't want to talk about that, it doesn't mean they don't want to talk about it. It doesn't mean they don't want to solve it. It means they're not ready to. It means it's emotionally charged. It's stressful. And it's hard for us loving, radiant empathy angels, it's hard for us to believe that our neurodiverse loved ones are afraid of us, or vice versa for that matter. Some neurotypicals are afraid of their neurodiverse loved ones too. It's hard to believe it. We're just asking for, would you just work with me? Because we're willing to put in 150%, so why aren't you? So first thing to know is that the person is, I hope this is making sense. I end up, when I do these lives, I talk a mile a minute because nobody's talking back. I have to go over here and read the messages. So if I'm going too fast, let me know. But the idea is to give that person permission to resist. Okay? Just, you say things like, okay, this isn't a good time to talk about it, but you don't give up. You say, we'll talk later. We'll talk another time. Or if you're in therapy with your partner, you can say, gee, this is a really great one. May I bring this up in our therapy session next week when we go in? I'm always giving people permission to do that. Just say, I'll save that for Dr. Marshak and we'll talk next week. Right? So you don't say we're not going to deal with it, but when you get resistance, when you get that pathological demand avoidance thing, or they don't even say no, they just don't hear you. You don't give up. You just realize, wow, I might need to, again, I'm going to use some NLP terms, you might have to chunk down your request so it's easier for the other person to handle. So, whoops. Yes, Anna, very good, Anna. She says, to be an empath, one must let go of the ego. Yes, this is exactly what this is. You think you need to be heard. But what if the other person is so fragile that they need you just to be there for them, or at least to give them space to be there for themselves? Doesn't mean you have to do anything. So let's see here. Oh yeah, Louise or Nancy. She said I'm not sure who is saying this, but I see mine as unsure of himself, but he never says he's unsure or doesn't know or needs to look it up. So let's see here. Louise says mine is so unkind sometimes. I have a serious TBI, traumatic brain injury is what that means, plus neuro issues from mold. Oh, that's terrible, in one apartment, and it's so hard to get him to help me. He just can't see the changes and needs in me, even though I've told him I need help. Yes, this is a more complex issue, isn't it? When you do need help, and in Louise's case, she's got some health issues. But sometimes the neurodiverse person doesn't know how to help, or doesn't see the cues that she's needing help, or doesn't know how to even talk about it. This is alexithymia. This is part of the disability. I have lots and lots of people on the spectrum tell me that they heard the question, but they didn't know what to do with it. Or they know what they're supposed to do, but by the time they figure out they should do it, it's too late. Alexithymia is a delay or a disconnect in the various parts of empathy that make it so easy for radiant empathy angels to do their job. Radiant empathy angels are Olympic athletes at empathy. The neurodiverse often have this alexithymia thing going on. So, and then then this is what Louise is talking about. She said he's unkind sometimes. What happens is if they can't figure out what to do and you're upset, the neurotypical is upset, sometimes you get a hostile comment. Like, well, that's not what you asked for, or I don't have time for that, or that's going to cost too much, or whatever a defensive behavior there is. And if you're feeling crummy, if you're feeling poorly, like poor Louise is talking about, how are you supposed to calmly let go of your ego and say, well, we'll talk about this another time? It's not so easy, is it? So the best you can do sometimes with those terrible situations is to say, I want to bring this up in our therapy session because at the moment you need some help. And maybe you have to call a girlfriend for help. I don't know. And then, yeah, I see the other comment was, I see him as unsure of himself, but he never says he's unsure, or he doesn't know or needs to look it up. So I think you're going to see that deer in the headlights look a lot from people on the spectrum because they've got a delay. They're waiting to process what you're saying, and a lot of times it sounds like Charlie Brown, right? Wah, 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 wah. They can't process so fast what you're saying. So a solution that I've often encouraged them to do is to please write things down, take notes, both sides, take notes. And if you need a moment or you feel the other person needs a moment, you can say, can we just take a break and kind of review our notes and maybe talk again in a half hour? Let's get a cup of tea and come back. Because if we can reduce the anxiety, if we can look at the words that we wrote down and the notes we took, you might be able to pull together information about what's going on. As a matter of fact, I did that when I was new as a psychotherapist. I'd write techniques down on note cards. In those days, I didn't have a phone, I didn't have a cell phone. I'd write it down on note cards, and I'd keep them under the arm cover on my chair. And sometimes I'd say, just a minute, and I'd pull my note card out and look at it, then I'd stick it back under the arm cover and talk to my client. And they didn't mind. And if they asked me, what are you doing? I'd say, oh, I'm just looking at my notes, hope you don't mind, because I would come right back and be with them. I would step back into the room with that person, into the emotional space. But sometimes I needed to look at my notes. So I think, taking notes is not bad. And in fact, I was thinking about a client of mine who, when he was a child, he was on the spectrum, and when he was in middle school, he thought he got it himself. He figured out that I take notes about everything, maybe I'll do better. So he wasn't just taking notes in class about an academic subject. He was taking notes about the teacher's behavior and the other kids in the class and whatever. And he went from C's to A's and B's because he was paying attention to the interaction, but he did have to look at his notes to review it. Right. And Julie says, I think it's important to go back to the conversation another time rather than letting it go. Right. Don't let it go, although both of you might want to let it go and you're kind of hoping that if it doesn't come up again, it's fixed, but it probably isn't fixed. So you make a note to yourself to think about it, to process it, and then come back. And you got to trust that you're going to figure it out. You've got IQ points. You can do this. So Anna says, would it be fair to say that most neurodivergents have a low self, and she means neurodiverse, have a low self-esteem even though they may be good people, so they're mostly on the defensive, angry energy? I'm going to say yes. I know that doesn't necessarily sound good because there's probably plenty of neurodiverse folks who are not so defensive, but if you think about having lived their entire lives, many people that we're involved with as adults right now were never diagnosed as children. And even if they were, they didn't get a good help. So if you've lived your entire life not sort of understanding this empathic flow that's going on with neurotypicals, and you just can't get it and you feel bad and you've been told that you're slow or you're not good enough or whatever, they're pretty traumatized and defensive. And so they go there easily, right? It doesn't mean that you're supposed to take it. I don't mean that. Right? I don't want you taking it. On the reverse, what we've got with our current radiant empathy angels formerly were codependent, right? The reverse is taking too much responsibility for the other person, jumping in and trying to fix things, which of course makes your neurodiverse loved one feel bad because they're always telling me my spouse thinks that they have to fix me. So Louise says, thanks, I forgot about that, writing to him instead of talking. It works much better to write. Good for you. Yeah, don't forget that one. See, we have to go over things over and over and over again before we get them. Put them on note cards, put them on Post-it notes, put them on your phone. Remind yourself, that you've got ways to communicate that work. And then as this taking notes and sending each other's emails, and working on it, when you come back and work on it again, and again and again, you don't need to put the note cards under the armchair cover sleeve. You're going to have it. You're going to expand your paradigm. Here's one. Louis says, a friend of my spouse told him he thought my spouse should get some therapy. If I said that, he'd say no. Yes. So what she's talking about is a lot of times we struggle because our egos get in the way. Just like Anna said, our egos get in the way. And if our spouse tells us we need to work on something, we're going to resist that. We don't need to do that. You trying to tell me there's something wrong with me? And you're going to say, well, yeah, there is something wrong. It's causing a problem for us. Can you work on this? But somebody else might say, gosh, this would be helpful. Like I have a client who's on the spectrum, and he was identified as a child, and he's just a really brilliant guy. And he's always telling his neurodiverse friends to go get therapy, and they struggle with it because they've got this negative self-image already, and therapy means I'm a loser, right? Which is not true. Oh yeah. Louise, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, she says I'm mom to him. It's awful. Yeah, it does feel like when your partner's resisting you, that it's like a 13-year-old resisting mom. as opposed to you're inviting him in to talk things through with you, right? And then Louise has said, she has TBI and, repercussions from mold. And so she may need some time to process too. She may not be with it in the moment, right? And so if he doesn't forgive her and let her take her time to explain things, and he just quickly dismisses her, that's not going to work. We've got to be there for each other. Nobody's perfect. We're going to make lots of mistakes. As a matter of fact, I really want you to think about expanding your paradigm. Yeah, Bridget, hi Bridget, said, yes, there's a lot of looking after. Yep, there's a lot of looking after the other person. But it really is more like stepping out of your paradigm and being empathic enough to consider another option. But I don't want you taking over for them. Yeah, Julie says, for me, it's that paradigm shift to think that I do know these things rather than believing the opposite. Right. Oh, thank you for pointing that out, Julie, because, one of the things I say all the time to my neurotypical, especially my radiant empathy angels, you know what you know. You know what you know. And you're probably right. But that doesn't mean that you don't need to take your time. You might have to chunk it down to help your partner get it. Right. So Anna says, I'm exactly this empathy angel for my spouse of 30 years, and it wasn't always this way. I was broken and out of gas with maintaining a sense of stability. It cut off part of your message there. Maybe but I think I know what you said. Yeah. So if Anna can do it, you can do it. If you can be out of gas and broken, you can rebuild yourself and rise out of that tidal wave and be there for yourself first, take care of yourself, and then you can offer something different to the other person. So I've told this story before where I was reading a book years ago, an edited book by Karen Rodman for adults on the autism spectrum, and she was sharing stories. Each chapter was a different person's story about having an adult in their family life, whether it was a spouse, a parent, a grown child, a sibling. But at any rate, each person was writing a little story about what it was like for them to live with or be in a close relationship with somebody on the spectrum. So obviously these are neurotypical stories. But I think the neurodiverse can read these stories too. It's a great book. It's been out probably 20 years. But I was reading it every night in bed. I'd read a chapter and then I'd go to sleep. Or I'd watch TV and read a chapter, whatever. And so I got to this one chapter and I fell asleep before I passed the first paragraph, and I thought, oh, I'm just tired. I'll pick it up tomorrow. And so the next night I opened up my book and I'm starting this chapter again, and I fell asleep again. I barely could keep my eyes open past the first paragraph. Maybe it was the first page. And I thought, oh, well, it's been a long week. I'm just going to go to sleep. So the next time I picked up this book, I started to fall asleep again. And I said to myself, I think there's something to this. I've said to myself, I think you're falling asleep because there's something in here you need to know. There's something in this chapter that you need to know, and it's hard for you to face. And so I was able to stay awake and read the entire chapter. This chapter was written by a woman whose mother was on the autism spectrum. And by the end of that chapter, I was crying tears you wouldn't believe, because I had no idea that my mother had been on the spectrum. And it opened up my mind to all kinds of misunderstandings I had about my mother, that she had about me, that I had about autism, because I had never faced that my mother was on the spectrum, and I had so much more compassion for her as a result of reading this chapter. But it took me 3 tries before I could expand my paradigm to include the possibility that there might be something new for me to learn. Looking here, good. See, it does. Lately, I often think of the divine or higher power and ask for help when I've gotten so frustrated with him. That helps me calm down, so it's good for me. I wish I could stop getting so hurt and angry. Yeah, good tip, Louise. Good tip. When you don't get it, maybe it's not your time to get it. Maybe it's not yours to do. Turn it over, right? Just turn it over, ask God for guidance, or tuck it away, sleep on it, make a note to yourself, wake up the next morning and go at it again. But you don't always have to be the perfect person and not be hurt or angry. I get hurt and angry all the time, but I know enough now to take my time rather than try to act on it, although sometimes I blow up. But the idea is that you're human, right? You got to forgive yourself. Oh, Julie says, can you share the name of the book? You know, I got the wrong, I can't remember the title, Julie, but the editor is Karen Rodman. And I'm sure you can Google it. Maybe you could Google and even put it down the string here for us. I love this book. It was so helpful. I just can't remember the title. It's kind of an odd title. And remember, Karen Rodman and her group are the people that came up with the Cassandra syndrome. This is where the term came from. So let's see here. Oh yeah, she says I know her. Good. There was another question that I skipped over, I think. Oh yeah, Anna says it takes self-work and therapies. When you have forgiven yourself for being a human being and not knowing everything and not being good at this stuff, you get better. You relax. If you say, oh yeah, I didn't know how to do that very well. Well, let me try again. Right? It works better. And that's why going to therapy helps. You don't have to be broken to go to therapy. Your therapist is there to help you expand your consciousness, not to fix you. Your therapist is there to guide you as you explore what's going to work for you differently than it works for somebody else. Let's see here. Oh, yeah, Karen Rodman is the author, but we're trying to think of the title of the book there. Oh, there we go. Helen, thank you, Helen. Asperger's Syndrome in Adults. Is anyone listening? Essays and poems by partners, parents, and family members. And it's on Amazon. It's a great book. Like I said, that was the first time I realized that my mother was on the spectrum, and then it all fell into place. My daughter was on the spectrum. I knew that. I was reading this book to understand better. And then I discovered my mother was on the spectrum, and then I had to take a hard look at my spouse. I went, oh my gosh, I'm surrounded. And my sister. I discovered my sister later. Right. Anna, the reason that people on the spectrum don't trust therapy is that they have a darn good reason, actually. If they've gone to therapy, what happens is that they often will have a very empathic therapist, but somebody who doesn't understand how autistic people think. Autistic people need coaching. They need tools. They need help with a tip as opposed to diving deep into the relationship. That's a little confusing for them. They want their relationships to be better, but they're not aware of how to do that. So you can't start at that level. You have to chunk it down. So I always tell them that the best therapy for someone on the spectrum is a good coach, as long as they understand autism. Let's see here. Alyssa Ann, I've been away from your live chats for a while. Life happens. I always feel like I am coming home when I listen to you speak. Oh, how sweet. And when our community of radiant empaths share with one another, I feel heard. Yeah, thank you for this reminder. I want people to get this. At the premium forum, at the meetup group, and even at the webinar forum, their private groups. It's like, it feels like rain on the desert. You go into the group and you hear somebody, understanding you without having to explain much. You just say a couple of words and they go, oh yeah. And that's not, it doesn't just feel good, we need it. I've talked about this before. We need, our neurochemistry needs to be understood. We're social. All of us, neurotypical and neurodiverse, we're all social. We need to get it and be gotten, because that stimulates our neurotransmitters and everything, just our endocrine system. It all works better when neurobiologically we are connecting. Let's see here. Louise says mine is going to work with Dan Holmes AS himself. One of the things that I always say for people seeking coaching, I think coaching's okay with someone who's on the spectrum, but it really takes a spectrum therapist a long time to see what's going on with the empathic person, because they have to think it through, because they've got alexithymia too. But it's not a bad way to go. Sometimes people will double up. I know therapists where one person is neurotypical and the therapist's spouse is autistic, and the autistic spouse does kind of the coaching stuff with the autistic couple they're working with, the autistic member, and the neurotypical does the couples counseling because they're better able to interface between those two worlds. I don't know if that makes sense. Yeah, Julie too. It is so good to be part of this community, to be heard and understood. It's like coming home. Really, it's just, like I said, it's like rain on the desert. It just feels like, gosh, I don't have to do anything extra just to be understood. Coming home is kind of like that childhood notion that all I have to do is be with mom and she's going to give me a snack and, all's right with the world. Or tuck me in at night, all's read me a story and I feel great. So we need that kind of affirmation and validation. Validation is not a sort of an extra sort of mind game. It really triggers neurochemistry that is relieving. It's relieving to us, and it's soothing, right? We all need it. We absolutely all need it. And if the other person isn't giving you affirmation because they're using those microaggressions, or they've got pathological demand avoidance stuff going on, we can step it out and be there, be radiant empathy angels. We can step it up and get why they can't give us affirmation, but that's still a cognitive thing. You have to go into our group, find a good friend. You've got to get your affirmation. You can't just operate as an angel. Remember, when God created angels, this is the Bible according to Dr. Kathy, the angels are perfect. We are not perfect. God created us so that God would have people to interact with who can grow and change and create just like God does. Now, remember, this is the Bible according to her, spirituality according to Dr. Kathy, but I sort of like this idea. We can grow and change. We can keep expanding our consciousness, but we can't do that in a vacuum, which is back to the question that the member left, which said, she said, love in a vacuum. Any ideas how you can encourage emotional connection and emotional intimacy in this kind of relationship? Also, is it possible for a high-functioning Asperger person to change and make emotional connections, or will it always be like this? Love in a vacuum. It feels like love in a vacuum. All right? When you don't get back, when it's not, when your empathy isn't reciprocated. And yes, it can get better, but it will need you to slow down so you can expand your paradigm, and it requires the other person being willing to be supportive of the radiant empathy angel too, right? It requires that you be supportive. Um, let's see here. We're almost out of time. I want to make sure I get to people's questions. Okay. Which resource would you say is best to start with to become a radiant empathy angel? Oh my gosh. What happens is, this is a good question. I'm not sure where to start. It is about forgiveness. It is about coming to terms with the fact that you're really wonderful, and that even the fact that you're attending this live means that you're willing to dig in and do better. When I teach my courses, when I write my books, I'm always pushing back responsibility on the user of the course or the reader of the book. It's your job to become stronger and better, more wonderful, not fix the other person. But I would read everything you can get your hands on. I obviously am going to recommend my books and my courses, because I emphasize evolving, expanding your paradigm and developing skills to do this work. But in terms of the reader's question, love in a vacuum, you cannot resolve the problems with your partner if you don't have backup of people that easily and comfortably get you, that you don't have to work so hard to get their attention, right? Julie says, Julie Chauvin, hi Julie, I haven't heard from you in a while. Being empathetic helps me to be understanding, but my autistic partner has never in 24 years become even a tiny bit more flexible. We've tried counseling, it makes no sense to him, and he is dyslexic, so I can't write or even text to him. I think it was less empathetic. If I was less empathetic, it would help me to see my reality for what it is and leave. So this is one of the tragedies of it all too, is that if taking care of yourself means you do have to leave because the other person won't move an inch towards you, then you need to do that, because otherwise you're just going to get sick. It's not good. So I don't say that you have to stay in a relationship where you feel like you're being abused or punished or not even, just ignored, invisible. I don't think you should need to do that. That's not good for us. It's just not so easy to leave after 24 years and with children and having built a life together and that sort of thing. It's not easy to do. So I can't tell you for sure, how to go to the next, how to go to the next level. And Debbie asked again, what's the name of the book? I think you meant the book by Karen Rodman, so you can look up on Amazon and just scroll up and find the title. And if you want my books, just go to the link I have on there, NeuroDivergent, Unlocking Neurodivergent Resources, or Resources for Unlocking Neurodivergent Relationships. I don't know what title I put on the darn thing. And Anna says, it will never be normal, though. This is true, but that's what makes you a radiant empathy angel, Anna. Having to, step it up to realize that you're different. One day I came home, I was having a dinner party with friends, and I came home and I said, gosh, I had this strange week. It seemed like 3 or 4 times this week I had a client who told me that I was eccentric. And everybody at the dinner table burst out laughing, and they said, you are. And that was before I understood that I had an autistic parent, an autistic spouse, and an autistic child. So, no, I'm not normal. I don't know how it would be in a normal relationship where it was easy and comfortable every day. I'm not sure I would know what to do. So let's see here. Oh, Julie says, yeah, Dr. Kathy's books. Nancy, I can't be a radiant empathy angel if I'm depleted. Self-care, self-compassion, personal growth is vital. Absolutely. You always start with you. Remember, again, here's spirituality according to Dr. Kathy. God loves you as much as everybody else. right? And you know yourself better than anybody else, so start with you. Do God a favor and take good care of yourself, and then you can be there for others. Oh my gosh, it says 6 new comments. I'm out of time. I gotta go, guys. But I will go back and look at these comments and do my best to leave you a written answer. And or if you want a private message, you can send me that too. But I'll go back in here. I just have to go because I'm out of time. And this will be posted to YouTube. And on YouTube, you can make comments, by the way. I, I think I forgot and closed off comments, but I think I've reopened them. So you can go there, watch the video, and make comments. Okay, take care, everybody. I'll see you soon.